So, I have read all the Horus Heresy books and the Siege of Terror books. Was it worth it? In the long term, after doing all that fucking shit for 3 years? Hell no. Hell fucking no. I ain't touching that ever again. Hell no. Then again, backtracking all the way from 8th edition when I started, when I was very new to it, I was looking to find something to read, just to get a bit more commitment. I did my own research and found some Horus Heresy books, and it seemed pretty attractive. And I said to myself, you know what, we're fucking bowling, and I'm gonna finish this. After 3 years with the Horus Heresy and Siege of Terror books, which is pretty much Horus Heresy as well, and 3 years later with the Horus Heresy and the Siege of Terror books all combined, and I'm just gonna say, no, I'm not reading the last one. Fuck off. I'm exhausted. That's all I'm going to say when it comes to this, like, the Horus Heresy and all that. So, in combination, it's about 62 books, and they're about 400 pages, but mainly is like in between 350 to 520, or the most average one is 450 pages in between, plus books that have short stories combined. There are a lot of things to cover, but I think I will try to focus on the main parts, because the issue with the Horus Heresy, right, to a certain extent, this could be like a 3-hour fucking video, and you won't see me in fucking 6 months until I make that, so not really worth it, but I think just to mainly focus on the main parts about the Horus Heresy, which is a pure mess, I'll focus on a couple things, right? The Primarchs, the Space Marines, and the mystique that was in the 40k that got removed, which the Horus Heresy was responsible of. Just in case, if people consider what I might say later, like about woke and all that, like, is Horus Heresy woke? I would say subtly yes, but more of the ending part than the start. It's in a very weird spot because at the beginning, you don't have that much of a, element into it. So it was alright. There wasn't anything too heavy about it. Like, it seemed like the characters were acting by itself, and then the more you go after the Horus Heresy, which was the 52nd book from the Buried Daggers instead of the Siege of Terror, now you started to see a couple things. Or in the book Betrayer, where you have Lotaro Sorin. In isolation, yeah, that might be the case, which might be alright, but once you look more into the character and all that, it's a little bit more suspicious, I would say. But they added a bit more subtly, just like how they did in Space Marine 2. Unless you know the lore well and pay attention to the detail and intention. You know, like female-only Titans, Lotaro Sorin, female Auxilia, which translate to Imperial God in 40k terms, Erda, Armada and Sadi, which I'm not going to discuss about these people in this video, probably I'll make a separate one later on. Now, this is almost, would say, being subtle. I wouldn't say it will be too heavy. But that's more like leaning into the direction at the late Horus Heresy stage and some of the Siege of Terror books. Now, for me, honestly, in general, zero women in the front lines or in the army, period, because it doesn't make sense, and to add the weakest gender that is more emotional and can be obliterated much more quicker than the stronger sex, which was men. And before we get into that, we are going for the annoying part.
You can't escape me!
You there! Yes, you! Are you interested in doing something much greater? A cause, a purpose to fulfill? Then why don't you join in my legion, the Hoppeldas Legion? They're hoplites but in space, with guns and all that. You get the idea. A legion so great it will put the Ultramarines to shame. To join in the legion, there are different tiers you can have a look on Patreon. Unless you want something much more convenient, then you can go on YouTube memberships with emotes and badge to put on yourself with your prideful rank. If you don't like other options, then you can go to Ko-Fi, where there is a place where you can name your price and send a message if you need to. What do you get in return, you say? Well, I've considered to add your name in the Hall of Fame at the end of my video to show my appreciation of you sacrificing your wallet for the Legion. And it will make me more committed to do more videos in the future. So what are you waiting for? Become something greater. Join us, brother. And together, we'll wipe the degeneracy off the planet. That is all for this advertisement. Even though you skipped it, you fucking heretic.
Heretic.
And now, let's get back to the video. Let's start with the Primarchs.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the ship mic. Let's go, baby! During Earth's isolation in the Age of Strife, the Emperor was already planning ahead. In preparation for the reconquest of the galaxy, he conceived of and created the 20 Primarchs, which is officially 18. These extraordinary characters were to be his generals, great leaders who would conquer millions of worlds in his name. Each Primarch would have powers and skills beyond those of any other human, possibly rivaling those of the Emperor himself. The Emperor's ambitions of the Primarchs appeared to be ruined by a cataclysmic event. A strange warp storm vortex snatched the still photal Primarchs from the Emperor's laboratory and cast them across the galaxy. Each Primarch was cast onto separate worlds where they matured. As the years passed, they came to dominate their worlds and became powerful warriors and leaders.
Now, this quote is from the Horus Heresy illustrations. It was sold in separate books from 2004 to 2006, and then it became an omnibus in 2007, which it is the one I have. It does mention the Horus Heresy 2 in the 4th edition, but also it mentions in the 3.5 Chaos Codex. But this is the show partly to understand what the Primarchs are made of. They were so enhanced that they were beyond human. The top 500 IQ individuals that were unmatched almost anyone in strategy and tactics in combat. You could say they're almost psychopathic, but mainly they are cold and calculated because they're very intelligent beings. Unfortunately, that's not what we got from the Horus Heresy books, which is the new ones. To a certain extent, it is the fault of GW and its authors making these 500 IQ beings written by room temperature IQ authors. In summary, in a way, they are nothing but whiny bitches that they become too human, pretty much humanized, casually talking, making jokes to the point that you're not seeing a Primarch, you're seeing ordinary dudes that do amazing things like demigods. Loga for the best example. Understandably, Monarchia got destroyed. The Emperor made the Legion to kneel and said they were a complete failure. Loga, the fatherless behavior. And instead of hiding that hate and pretend to nod and collect his Legion to do something else and maybe made this like a private time, instead, after the Emperor left, Loga got his knees, got stunned and shocked, and started screaming like a little bitch in the sky for about a minute or so, while the Ultramarines and Gilliman was right there and saw it. Quite embarrassing. And then there was like an argument between a chaplain and the Lion. The context was Chaos forces were entering into the Lion's ship, and the Lion was like, we probably need the Librarians. And the Chaplain was like, no, we need to follow the Council of Nicaea that the Emperor commanded. And it went so back and forth to the point that the Lion got so angry that he doesn't even remember what he did, and the Chaplain's head was already cut off. Honestly, that is such a drama fest. You know what it should have happened? If the Lion says, we're gonna need to like unlock the Librarians and shit, and if the Chaplain said no, the Lion would just look at him, like stone cold face, and just chop his head off. Because what the fuck is the Chaplain gonna do? Stop him? Now, Perturabo, making him a whiny bitch while he is able to get the shit done. It is so fucking stupid. It's like a child being told to do the dishes and he complains about it and then he does it anyways. Again, 300 IQ individuals called Primarchs written by room temperature authors. And there are some examples more like that. So, the problem with it is, they are not what they're meant to be. Intelligent demigods. They are beyond human and they shouldn't be this humanized. Like, keep in mind, the authors are reading them in more like a third-person perspective than to write them in their eyes of how they act. And that's the problem with that. Like, as much as it is neat of Gilliman coming back to 40k, but instead of making him like, whoa, okay, this is a little bit different, but you know what? Fuck it, let's go and fix it. But instead, they made him a depressed dude that is trying to fix it. And I think the authors and GW are too focused making a dramatic character-focused story than being what they are supposed to be. 500 IQ intelligent demigods. Now, this is very similar with 40k when people try to argue, it's about the story, it's about the characters, you know? If we had to stick with the setting, then it will be boring and all that. Like, that's all I'm hearing, and they're not even talking about like if it's accurate to the setting as it's meant to portray. I'll go very simple analogy. If the Space Marine is meant to be 9 feet tall that is written in the Codex, then the Space Marine is meant to be 9 feet tall. Not George, who's a Space Marine, got so fed with fucking cereal that he grew to 10 feet tall. Dumbass. And I've been noticing this pattern. I think people are missing a bit of the mark when they're trying to look for it. It's about the setting that is more important, not the characters and story. And I've already covered this why 40k fans do not understand grimdark. The first notice you'll see, it will be in the first book in the Horus Rising, is how Space Marines and Primarchs act, and of course, how it's written. Now, the specific story that I recall well was the character called Tormageddon. And I keep getting confused with Torgaradon since they sound very similar with each other, but He's meant to be this jokey space marine in the Monovel, and if you don't know what Monovel is, it's like a little council with a Primarch, which is Horus, making decisions in a united Earthen. Now, the specific scenario that I'm talking about in Horus Rising is when Tormageddon, he's trying to, like, break the ice, making some jokes on the operations table. And then afterwards, Horus just looks at him very angrily and starts shouting at him because he's now the War Master and it's taking pressure on him. But from what we understand from Space Marines and Primarchs, they should be fine with this kind of level of pressure. If it was an ordinary human, it would make absolute sense. A Space Marine though, biological enhanced, that is beyond human? You telling me he can't handle a pressure of 18 fucking legions as War Master? Like, this is just fucking silly. Now, of course, me and Gebs already covered this topic about Space Marines in much more in depth, and you can already check this video. Primarchs are meant to be this 500 IQ individual, but then in this story, Horus getting frustrating and emotional, like, it's just fucking silly. And then you have other things like Magnus did a little oopsie on the Emperor's throne because he wanted to warn the Emperor about Horus's fall, so he broke the thing, and then he realized his mistake, and then Lehman came to punish Magnus to a certain extent, but at the same time he got intervened by Horus and told him just go and kill him and all that. But it's just so weird because Magnus is just sitting there and is just sitting like a sobbing bitch. He's just like, I did a mistake, you know what? I'm just gonna go and sit in this and I'm not gonna tell my legion that the Space Wolves are coming and defend this planet or anything. Now, yeah, I'm just gonna cry in the corner of the bitch. That's how it is. My goodness. And then not only that, afterwards, he changed his mind and he's like, you know what? I'm gonna go out with my legion and fight against the Space Wolves. I'm like, this couldn't be any more dogshit writing. Please. I know there was mentions as well, like Lehman trying to speak to Magnus in some other ways of communication before Lehman comes in. But yeah, that's the whole thing about that. And there's another one where Dorn gets angry against like a Space Marine because fucking, what's his name? Garrow. That's his name. Garrow was just like, well, looks like you have emotion feelings about him. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And Dorn was like turning around and he's like, what the fuck did you say, little bitch? And then started screaming and shit. The levels of drama the writers had to write in is so fucking stupid. And then this continues to happen in False Gods and a little bit in Galaxy Flames. And I don't recall exactly, but I think it was around the Galaxy in Flames where the Inspan 3 started. And one of the things that tipped me off, it was at first time reading it, I thought it was funny and it was a little bit goofy, but at the same time, in hindsight, it's fucking stupid. What I'm talking about is a story about Sol Tavitz, an Emperor's Children legionnaire that warned the Space Marines in Inspan 3 to go and take cover because they were about to get fucking virus bombed. And then later on, he joins in and then he dies. Spoilers. Shocking, am I right? The book has been out for like fucking 20 years. No excuses. But the thing that was annoying much more was that Angron came to the planet and then he started slaughtering his own world eaters. And then specifically in the book, it says, I'm gonna be paraphrasing this, but it says specifically in the book where it's like, and then Sol Tavitz felt actual fear and shit himself and just ran away. And I'm just like, shut the fuck up, please, no. Shut the fuck up. That's pure shit writing. And the problem that I have with this issue is this happens in, like, again, even in Fulgrim. It is that the authors who write these things, they prioritize the drama first, than the being lore accurate. I know, I get it, 40k has no canon, but for the sake of this argument, let's try to be accurate, right? Now, this is me going by memory, since it's just 52 books, but I won't list every single one of them. But from memory, the ones that I tried to make it dramatic is Betrayer, Angels Exterminatus, Horus Rising, Fulgrim, and I think the one that involves with Korax and involves with his sons, with the poor genetic thing. Well, it's not poor genetic problem, it was more of that the Alpha Legion came in and just interfered with the gene seed of the Raven God and then made them more chaos and shit and blah, 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 whatever. The Path of Heaven, Wolf's Bane, Titan Death, and the Buried Dagger. Now, this is purely from memory, but most of them are trying to make these stories more dramatic than they should be. And I recall an example that is still stuck in my head was the World Eater versus the Custodian. I'll probably just show you on the screen once I edit this. So, do you guys recall that story? Right. In short, there was like a Crusader host that involved mostly with Traitor Legion, so Sons of Horus, Thousand Sons, Death God, World Eaters, and etc. So those guys try to break out the place And then there was more to it. There was an psyker involved. They had to pluck his eyes out and all that, etc. But the specific scene that I remember very well was the Custodian versus the World Eater. Okay, so we know how Custodians are. We know what they did to the Thunder Warriors and how really good they are against Space Marines. Right, between the Custodian and the Space Marine, who do you think who wins? I'm really curious what you think about it. I'm just telling you, what do you think is gonna happen? What happens is, they had this little duel in between each other, and it went to the point that the World Eater was so angry. By the way, he's unarmored, and the Custodian is, and the World Eater goes in, punches through the armor, and rips his heart out, and kills the Custodian. Because he was too angry. Because he was too fucking angry. And he took his spear, snapped it in half, and made it kind of like a sword as a trophy. Now, in a couple pages later, the World Eater encounters another Custodian. Right? Who do you think who wins? This time, the Custodian walks in, slices him in half, and he's already dead. Do you see the inconsistency when it comes to this? Right? Oh, here's another example about the, and also with another thing with Custodians in the Betrayal book. There are 3 Custodians that are meant to watch over the World Eaters, right? Not World Eaters, Word Bearers. They're meant to be looking over them. And at the same time, they were so chatty. I'm sorry, stoic, golden bodyguards of the Emperor and then just being chatty like normal humans. Okay. And not only that, right? So, I can't remember exactly specifically, but it involves with the Custodian sacrifice. Hopefully some of you know that. It involved with, Argur Tal convincing one of the Custodians to go together onto a planet, which was Cadia. They hinted it was Cadia, to be honest. And then, quote-unquote, the Custodian was, quote-unquote, ambushed against Argur Tal and the rest because they were facing against the Gal Vorbak. And it was either Gal Vorbak or I think this was much more accurate, where there were so many humans that went on top of the Custodian and started stabbing him and then put his body onto some sort of table and then sacrificed his blood for it. And then when the Word Bearers came back without the Custodian or with the Custodian's body, the Custodians had no suspicion whatsoever. They were like, this is the mightiest warrior that we ever seen, my goodness. Or they just had no questions at all. No suspicion like, I think these guys are plotting something or some bullshit. Nope, they were just fine with it. Poor writing at its finest. So even with that, it has a lot of inconsistencies, and it shows because every writer was written in a different way, and it's pulling the Horus Heresy one part to another. Oh, Dead Abnett writes the fucking Horus Heresy, someone writes the next book, and someone writes the next book, and they don't sound coherent, right? The Emperor was just like fucking tanking on one end, and then he struggled against the first murderer demon. I forgot his name, but it's in the Emperor book. They're not being coherent. Incoherent story leads to unreliable narration, and which leads to shit writers, and now you have 40k no canon shenanigans. And then you have someone like Lewitton to do mental gymnastics to make it true. The main issue, I would say, that caused 40k to transfer into 40k into Horus Heresy 2.0, and it's that it lost its mystique. 40k has its mystique and legends with its rich lore, and it shows in a bigger universe. And that's where you can make a lot of fun theories to it, and it's just much more easier to see okay, there's this here, and now we're gonna theorize what it could be. And the best example that I could say is Forever Winter. Forever Winter, just gives you enough examples and leaves the rest as a mystery, as a legend, because keep in mind, you're focusing in the present. You're focusing in the main war that is happening. I don't think anybody's gonna come back and be like, let's go and see what the history was about 60 years ago. Nope. There's war still going on. No one really gives a shit, so they might as well just try to survive as much as possible. And then most that people will listen to are just pure legends. And I think I like that. And that's what 40k has missed out on. But then again, when the Horus Heresy started back in 2006, it was a neat idea. But then after later on, 52 books later, it became bloated, inconsistent, and they're trying to tell you and explain everything to you. There's no mystery behind it. And instead of doing what the Omnibus is doing and just giving it just enough of a backstory, but leaving the rest as it is. But then again, GW and authors are lazy, incompetent. Well, in today's age, some of them are like to push a certain message than to make a good product. And because of that, it may pop off in popularity, but it does ruin the 40k. because it's lost its mystique. Horus Heresy is meant to be the attachment of 40k, not the other way around. But the main issue is because of the Horus Heresy that became so successful, they wanted to bring in more Horus Heresy stuff. So thus, they bloated and cluttered so much lore in order to sell more books, and most of them are just unnecessary. Because keep in mind, this is Horus Heresy. We are here for the main story, which is about Horus and his journey to Siege of Terra. And of course, there may be some side characters and other Primarchs and Horus side characters, but this shouldn't be such an overbloat where other characters, which I will forget them in the next 2-3 books. There are so many characters, at this point, I really do not give a shit. And even with short stories, they have some nice stories, but they don't add any major element to the Horus Heresy or the meaning of its effect. Now, for this video, keep in mind, this is the main points I'm trying to cover for this topic because the Horus Heresy itself is very big, so it's just like how I did with the why Warhammer 40k is no longer grimdark video, and then I started to break down in each specific video topic. Let's be honest, there's no way nobody will watch a 1 hour to 2 hour long video, which most of you would like the summary of things or a general idea, than a over-detailed things because that would just bore the audience. Let's be honest with this one. For me, I'm just hitting the main points of the Horus Heresy. Astartes and Primarchs being humanized, being inconsistent with its lore, with the writer of what they have, even though some are questionable since they like to push a certain message. But that's because partly of what they've done with other books. And losing its mystique, and more importantly, being forgotten of what 40k was meant to be in the first place. Remember, when 3rd and 4th edition was written, they were written like it's legend, the present time, where almost everything is about war. The Golden Age is more of a far distant memory that most have been forgotten in such times, and other than knowing that is legend. The Horus Heresy is meant to be a background piece for 40k, but instead, it surpasses 40k and transforms 40k into Horus Heresy 2.0. Why do you think they try to make these kinds of novels? Because they wanted to make another Horus Heresy, but in 40k, since it has been very so successful. So why not make a current one? Personally, I like the omnibus of the Horus Heresy than the current novels and etc. because it gives you enough to work with, but it has the mystery that is still laying in the background to mess with. The problem with novels, they spoon-fed to you so much that they have to explain everything to you, like every British fat fuck, instead of giving you just enough and leave some into your imagination. Personally, I wouldn't even touch about the Horus Heresy 2.0 because I ain't interested. I like people say, it's like 7th edition and okay, and I would have gone and played the old edition, which is 7th edition, instead of playing the new Horus Heresy stuff. It's almost like they know the old stuff is good, and then they want something new because for the sake of new. If you wanted 7th edition, you might as well go play 7th edition and not Horus Heresy 2.0. Oh, you want Space Marines versus Space Marines? 7th edition Codex. If you get bored, expand that to other factions in 7th edition Codex. You see, the Horus Heresy only offers Space Marine versus Space Marine action, while 7th edition provides more than just Space Marines. Some of them like that, but some of them don't. I used to like the idea of an isolated background where there's just Space Marines and Space Marines each other because I like the idea of the background and all that. But now I'm like, you know what? I just want to find aliens, which are much more interesting. And then again, people still don't understand when I'm talking about these subjects like this, and I always bring it back about the setting, not stories, not what you read in the novel, because those are arbitrary when we're talking about the base model and the idea of what these things are. For example, Doom Guy, he's silent, cold, and a murdering machine. And if he starts getting chatty and wants to play diplomacy games, then from our understanding from the ground foundation, this is not what Doom Guy is. Like, should I talk about the MK upgraded helmets for Space Wolves that makes them more furries than Vikings? Small incremental changes like this is gonna change the Horus Heresy. Just how it happened in 40k, it would happen to Horus Heresy. We'll see in the next couple years what happens. But I'll end it here. I'm not sure how long this is gonna be, but this will maybe take a while for it to record, but it should be at least long enough and before I start breaking down each individual thing about the Horus Heresy, which I will get 0 views about it, but hey, look, I'll fucking do it regardless. That is all for this video. You can check me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, and YouTube memberships. You can check me on Discord, or you can check me on YouTube's community page for any updates. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye, my brothers, and take care.